fellow filmmakers, Clifton Stommel here, joined today by
Joe Gunn, cinematographer.
And a great cinematographer at that. I'm very excited to have him here. And he will give us some great insight on the lens we're reviewing today, which is the Laowa 25-100mm T2.9, listed as OOOM here on the side. Do you know what that's about? Does that stand for something?
Well, from what the guys at Laowa says, this OOOM literally means out of our minds. And that's because this lens is a very, very versatile lens. You get a T2.9 25-100mm focal length.
And that's a legitimate all-in-one lens. When I look at lenses and I see the things that are sort of trending and popular within photography and video, 24-70 is such a staple. The 24-105 was one of my favorite lenses, but that f4 starts to really hurt and hinder when you're trying to get subject. Yeah, it's a little slow. Subject isolation can be a bit of a tricky thing when you're on the wide end. And I love the 24-70, but I do miss that extra 50% range on the long end. This is sort of that dream lens at 24-105 or 25-100 range at the f2.8 or T2.9 aperture, which is crazy to have accomplished that in one lens.
Given the price range, there's not really a lot of competition that will give you the focal length and the speed on the lens.
All right, so for those of us who are coming from video DSLRs or still shooting in video DSLRs, maybe are renting cinema cameras from time to time, a lot of us are accustomed to using either just photo lenses that have a zoom range, but this is a true cinema zoom, right? This is actually manufactured from the ground up to be for cinema specifically and for video. So what are some of the things about this that make it unique from a photo zoom lens that has this kind of range of these sorts of specs?
Well, to begin, it didn't come from any steel glass. This is from the ground up created just for cinema. That's one of the great things about it. It has a PL and an EF mount. It has full 0.8 pitch gearing on all three sides right here on your focus, your zoom, and your iris. And the iris is declicked too, so it's a working proper cinema lens.
Which of course is valuable when you're doing something like filming from outdoors to indoors or indoors to outdoors. So you have those sudden exposure changes in your environment. You can actually smooth adjust as you move through those spaces. Or if you're just outside and a cloud suddenly covers the sun, or it was cloudy and now the sun's coming out, you can do those smooth transitions to sort of match your environment changing around you.
And unlike a lot of photo lenses where your focus ring can spin freely, this has proper hard stop, and also the markings on the side, which is great for assistant cameras. And the focus throw on this lens is 270 degrees. That gives a lot of control in terms of focus where you want it to be. You're not just gonna move up a little bit and now you're at infinity.
Now I do want to mention that when it comes to this 270 degree focus throw, while that's really great for getting a super fine focus, that does mean that you need to either have a speed crank or a wireless follow focus so that you can quickly and easily turn that. If you're trying to do a full focus rack with this sort of handheld on a single operator where you're just going to grab the lens and go, you have to turn and turn and turn and turn and turn to reach end focus. With a focus throw that far, it's really designed for a professional environment where you have a first AC or you have someone that has a wireless follow focus.
Yeah, I would definitely want to have at least a follow focus. That way you'll have a proper control, it'll feel more ergonomic, and you're not trying to twist all the way around and possibly messing up your frame because you are trying to go all the way around and recapturing it. So.
And actually, speaking on focus, I do like that the minimum focus is marked at 2 feet here, but it lets you go a little bit past that, so if there's any sort of flange issues, you can still reach that range. And the same on the far end, it goes just past infinity. If you have a miscalibration on the flange depth on your particular camera, you're still gonna be able to reach infinity focus because it goes just a little bit further past. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the advantages of a cinema zoom in particular?
Two of the biggest advantages with cinema zoom is when you're zooming in and out, cinema zooms are parfocal. That means it will stay on focus whether you're gonna be on the wide end or the long end. It also has zoom tracking. That means wherever your crosshair is, as you're zooming in, it will stay on that subject, on that point.
This actually makes a lot of sense to me why you would want that in a cinema environment, because as a photographer, right, when you're shooting stills, all that matters is that one frame, that moment that you snap the picture. So it's okay that you may lose and have to reframe if you zoom. It's okay that you have to refocus when you zoom as well, because you're not capturing every single moment of that action.
Yeah, and when it comes to cinema zoom, the thing that you want to have is precision. It needs to be precise when it comes to focus pulling, it needs to be precise when it comes to zooming in, and it needs to be precise when it comes to your aperture. So the less things in there, like the AF and the IS is in there, the more it could focus like a Swiss watch, where it's exactly what it needs to do.
I do.
What? Really?
Yeah, your monitor's shaking on your computer. Do you feel that?
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Whoa. Okay, this is getting intense.
That's a small one. There you go.
Yeah, it was increasing for a second. That was cool.
Just a little bit.
Whoa. All right, so that pretty much covers it for the physical outside of this lens. It's built like a tank, 5.5 pounds, far focus throw. Let's talk about the glass.
Well, the glass comes in 20 elements in 16 groups, and it also has 9 rounded aperture blades.
20 elements.
Oh, yeah.
So there are 20 individual pieces of glass in here in 16 groups. That's crazy. That's a lot of manufacturing.
Yeah, and that's why it's actually pretty heavy, because it does have a lot of glass in there. I mean, it's probably about the same size as 7200 Canon.
Yeah.
Just weighs twice as much.
So how does that many elements and that many moving parts affect loss of light, we'll say, as you're zooming in and out?
When it comes to aperture ramping, which is as you zoom in, how much light you lose, it stays consistent till about 70, 75. And in between 75 to 100, you lose half a stop, which is actually still pretty good.
Yeah, seriously, that's not bad at all. I mean, I remember my 24 to 105. I think I lost about 2/3 of a stop when zooming all the way in versus out at 24. So for this to only lose a half stop only at that last third of the zoom range, to me that seems really reasonable. Now, when it comes to the edge sharpness, chromatic aberrations, vignetting, how does it perform there?
Well, surprisingly pretty good. We noticed when we were filming in the kitchen that the hot spots that's splashing on the counter doesn't have any fringing. And even at wide open, it stays relatively sharp. I only noticed a slight loss of sharpness on the very, very long end in that 85 to 100. It's lose a little bit of resolution, but it's really hard to tell.
And this lens actually has some really nice warmth to it when it comes to the color rendition. Comparing this sort of against the Zeiss CP2s and the Zines that we have on hand here, it still has this kind of filmic look to it, especially with the warmth of the lens. Kind of plays nicely to an aesthetic.
And yeah, it's definitely a modern lens still, but it's not clinical or analytical, which is really, really great. It has a little bit of character. And I even noticed too that it's almost like there's a slight filter that you would put on, like let's say a Black Promise or Hollywood Blackmagic. So it has a nice glowy look when it comes to skin. So it's a very attractive lens for shooting people.
And man, let's talk about that flare.
Oh, yes.
Oh, possibly my favorite part.
If you love flare, this lens has some fun flares to it. And the fun thing about it is that it looks like there's 2 sides of it. If you're wide open, it has a certain characteristic. But then when you stop down, it has a really nice look that's more of a classical cinematic flair to it. So yeah, you get a lot of play with it.
Yeah. For me and a lot of narrative stuff I do, I like to have a bit of a softer, sort of washy look to the flares, and I like to see my frame sort of breathe with the way that the contrast plays. This thing is a really nice middle ground. You can clearly see those rings on the flare, and it gets just enough of the wash on top of that. And yeah, when it's wide open, holy cow, that crazy like rainbow solar flare burst veiling thing, that I love that. I'm gonna use this thing wide open and ping the lens with lights so often. Anything that gives the frame a really unique look or has like that level of characteristic, I think is awesome, and I hope that they don't change that.
And the good thing about it too, it's actually pretty controllable. You have to really aim at it a little bit more. So if you don't like to have too much flare, you could just aim your light a little bit off and you're fine. You don't need to worry about it's flaring everywhere.
Right.
So you have the best of both worlds. You have flare control, and when you want the flare, you have a beautiful flare. Versus the Zines and the Zeiss, there's a slight bloominess when it comes to your practical lighting that looks really nice and attractive. It doesn't look like a hard edge, even if it's in focus. So that gives you a little nice, once again, a little that filter effect that you would get, let's say, with a Black Provis or something similar.
Yeah, and actually those lights in this particular shot do a really good job of sort of, with that blooming sort of aura that you get off of those, really nicely warming up the shadows and really creating that vivid look that looks so nice.
Yeah, let's talk about the bokeh.
Bokeh.
I find that because it has 9 rounded aperture blades, even when you stop down, it's pretty rounded bokeh, and overall, it's creamy. Like, I was surprised that There's enough separation when you stop down. There's a little bit of dimensionality on the wide end especially.
And you don't have to rely on, again, being wide open all the time just to have decent bokeh. You can actually do it at 5.6 or 8 or 11 or 22 if you're zoomed in all the way.
Speaking of which, there's not that much distortion. I really don't notice it. Like when we're shooting the dancer, as we're pulling back, we're not getting any kind of pin cushioning or barreling happening with all the wooden structures on the left and right side. So it's really nice, kind of a rectilinear look to it. When it comes to contrast, I find that it's a little lighter in contrast, which is actually really good because then you can always darken pose. So it gives you a little bit of nicer range. It also gives a little bit more of a film look range because I think if you have too much contrast from the get-go, then you have to deal with that in post.
So have a heavy look to bake in.
Yeah. When it comes to vignetting, as you could see in the dancer video, we have a lot of beige walls. And as we're pulling back on the lens and as we're panning over, we're noticing that there's very minimal vignetting that's happening.
And yeah, I tend to be a fan of a little bit of vignetting, but that's something that you can add a little bit of that effect in post. And if you're stuck with that in camera, it's much harder to remove it when it's in the footage than it is to sort of add a little bit of it and bring attention in. So I think it's great that this thing has minimal to no vignetting, right? Perceptual, at least, for sure. Then you can control that as you need to in post.
Yeah, unless you're shooting just white plain walls.
All the beautiful shots of focus charts and white walls that are in films, of course.
Oh yeah, that's a standard part.
Standard part, yeah.
Like I said, you can't go wrong with shooting people with this lens. This really punch above its weight class.
It really does. And even with, the model's warm skin in a environment that has this great golden wood, right, you still have this really nice separation between model and environment. Who would you say is the ideal demographic sort of target market for this product?
I think just about any filmmakers can use this lens. It's a very versatile lens. This is actually a really good lens that could be used for any kind of scenario.
And it's affordable enough to actually buy.
Yeah, it's just a good lens overall. It doesn't feel like you're spending the price of a car.
Right. And again, for anyone thinking about, $6,500, that's so much for a lens. If you think of this as a 24, a 35, a 50, an 85, and a 100, right, you're basically getting 5 lenses in a single lens package. So if you think of it as a $6,500 lens set, it's actually a very reasonable price to have that while saving all that space, right? What are some circumstances under which you wouldn't use this lens?
I would say this is not a vintage lens, so you don't want to treat it like a vintage lens unless you put the proper filter and everything on there.
Of course.
And of course, it's only a Super 35, so you can't really use it for a Venice or a Red Monstro or even a Sony a7S without cropping it down. And at 5.5 pounds, it's not the lightest lens, but it's built like a tank.
That's
you
true.
know? The whole casing is metal. Even the lens cap is metal.
Yeah, this is a 114mm front with a lens cap that goes on the inside. That's pretty cool. I see those, those suction, like food bowl style. I say that as I'm shooting on my zine, which has that kind of lens cap. But yeah, it's nice to have that little clip system that's on a metal lens cap. Granted, the rear cap is plastic. I have to say that so that people aren't confused.
Most
but
PL mount.
I'm not stressing.
PL lens caps are plastic.
No. It's just I technically have to say it, right? It's because it's like, well, nothing here is plastic, and then someone's gonna buy it and go, no, wait a minute, I got a bunk unit.
Yeah.
Also, given its size and weight, though it is very affordable and for what it is, it's very, very compact and very manageable. This is definitely not a zero rigging, handheld, run and gun guerrilla shooting machine, right?
No, you're not gonna be able to put this in a pocket and just carry around or walk about. You'll get some notice on it. But it's, even then though, I mean, if you really want to handhold this, it's still not that big. It's just kind of like a 7200 Canon.
Yeah.
You're not carrying like an Angenieux Optimo
right.
where you gotta have 2 hands just on the lens alone.
Right, right.
It'll be a little bit of weight, but I think it's still manageable if you really want to.
Wouldn't necessarily be the first go-to for the long 12-hour day of handheld. But yeah, I mean, honestly, even just a simple easy rig would be more than enough to get this thing's weight where you need it to be to actually go ahead and do an all-day shoot.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty much just a step above lightweight zoom lens. Lightweight zoom lens is usually about 4.5 pounds. This is about 5.5 pounds, so it's not like you're putting 8 pounds of lens on you.
Well, cool. I am very, very excited for this lens. Honestly, it exceeded my expectations. When you first mentioned this to me and I first saw this thing at NAB and you were telling me that we have access to a copy, I was very excited to try it out. A little skeptical, of course, because it seems almost too good to be true. This lens really is kind of in a class of its own, and I'm very excited to see what people make with it, as well as what happens next with Laowa. So yeah, Joe, I want to say thank you so much for helping me out here, and for our audience, where can people find you, follow you, and connect with you?
Well, easiest way is through my Instagram is at joegunnawan616. That's JOEGUNAWAN 616.
And we'll put a thing on the frame somewhere in here so that people can see that as well. And a link in the description. He's awesome. His stuff is great. Follow him, like his stuff, send him a lot of messages.
Send me more lens pictures, yeah.
Well, yeah, send him pictures of your lenses and demand his feedback on them. Last but not least, of course, where can people find this lens and when might this lens happen?
I believe this lens should be coming out at the end of this year, maybe sooner, and there's already a pre-order at Hot Rod Cameras and Douglas Lenses.
Awesome, and we'll put links to those as well in the video description below. All right, well that, I believe, is everything, and we'll see you guys next time.
All right, take care.